So, I picked up the expansion to High Frontier. I did this after knowing that I wasn't terribly thrilled with the base game. But, I hate having half a game, which is what you buy when you buy the base game. So I figured, fine, I'd cough up the extra $20 and get the rest of the map, or $30 or whatever, get the rest of the map. And since I already have the rules for that, because they come in the original game, I just decided not to package a few of the cards and the map. I'm not sure about the marketing decision there. Personally, I would have rather bought a single game for $60 than maybe pay $65 or whatever it is to buy it in two pieces. It's not that there's no value in the original game, and I really question how much, from what I've heard, there will be value added by this expansion. But it does clarify one thing, and I wanted to start with that. I'll come back later with some of the other stuff if I decide to press on. The one thing that it clarifies is that something that disturbed me, which was, I don't feel like this complex map adequately even represents the mobile nature of planetary relationships. Whereas I've seen games that have tremendously simple maps comparatively. Battlefleet Mars, I believe, comes to mind, where it represents the side rail movement, which to me is much more interesting than all the complexities that this map represents. This map seems to represent a fixed point in time. It really does. And that was one of my worries was, hey, if I'm going, from Earth to Mars, these same paths remain more or less fixed, no matter what. And that may be a not completely unreasonable abstraction when we're talking Earth to Mars, although I know that there are several there are periods where it's just not considered reasonable to try to launch from Mars. Okay. But when we add in these, what are they called? Oh, the comets, the synodic comets. They base them, when you can actually land on them, to the sunspot cycle. And I started thinking, okay, that is kind of nice. We've got time fit in somewhere. Although I would say, if we're talking Halley's Comet, I don't know how. I know that it comes very, very infrequently, and I assume a lot of these others do too. So, I'm not sure entirely what's being represented here, because time passes fairly quickly. This could indicate a period of time in which all these comets are more or less on the board, more or less here, and there's some strange reason why you can't hit them except every. So this thing moves, and I'll explain how it moves, and indicates which comets you can hit, among other things. It moves when you get a random event. And random events are triggered by a player moving through one of these little triangles in his turn. Which means that the players, to begin with, aren't launching, so time doesn't move. Okay, we can say it's not important whether time moves, because it's an abstraction and the beginning is the perfect point to start launching or something like that. But the fact that players can control how much time moves by their actions and by their choices disturbs me. It's not absolute disturbing. I know CDGs have that kind of effect on the game, etc. But it definitely doesn't seem reasonable that I could calculate out a trip to one of these comets very, very carefully. And then when I get there, because somebody took a weird turn, it's no longer there. Yeah, that bugs me. That bugs me a lot. And that means time isn't time anymore. It's something else, and I don't know what, but it's a gamey thing. And I'll tell you, when I start looking at that decision and then combine it with my gut feelings, which are that, oh look, Saturn doesn't seem to actually move. Now, if we're talking about a time scale large enough to affect whether or not you can hit a comet, and the comet's going to be in the same place every time you hit it, and it really is, it's either there or it's not. I'm just feeling like there were some decisions made as to what was and what was not going to be represented. And I feel like the level of detail and pain in the head that this map represents in terms of trying to figure out a way to get somewhere, which, you know, is a nice simplification, apparently, of lots and lots of the real science in rocket science, or at least in the astrophysics behind the actions that it's attempting to make. But, I mean, it's along the lines of having really, really detailed down to, you know, the boiling, the water usage in Campaign North Africa, but then, you know, ignoring the fuel supply. It feels like the game has made a decision to go into so much detail on something that's painful, that maybe made a beautiful map to some people's minds, maybe not so much to mine. I mean, to me that's just a headache, but yet doesn't achieve any more realism whatsoever. It actually achieves far less, in my opinion, than a much, much older game managed. You know, I compare this to, I already compared it to Battlefleet Mars, which handles the movement of the planets, which I think is much, much more indicative of what kind of decisions need to be made than these sort of tactical burn rates on fuel when you're hitting you know, certain slightly different orbital paths, etc., where you might have to spend just a little bit more fuel than if we did straight line traces on moving planets. But even if we want to take a static snapshot, something like Triplanetary, which actually takes into effect a lot of the gravity effects, maybe not in the most realistic of fashions, but you've got your gravity wells, they have their effect on your burns, etc. I don't know what this is beyond a very complex game that doesn't adequately represent the movement that all the complexity is built into. Let's look at some of the other things here that come with it. There's a few new thruster, reactor, and sorry, did I get the right things here? That's refinery, thruster, refinery, and Robonaut cards. Like maybe one of each or something. And then there's these new things: the radiator, the generator, and the reactor. And if you've already got the rules to High Frontier, you can kind of have a feel for what these do. Basically, you need them in order to back up some of your units, some of your items. So, for example, looking for something. So, No, not that. That's a new one. This guy needs a specific type of reactor to even operate. He needs a reactor with that symbol on it. And then you draw a reactor when you buy a card that has a support that it needs. Those are supports. And if you get the wrong kind, well, that's your problem, and you got to figure out how to get the right kind, I guess. But instead of the basic game mass, you end up using an advanced game mass, and whatever the backups are may add to that mass. You also have the Radhard, which every little space has a radiation zone for it. And the Radhard, basically when you travel through a radiation zone, you roll a die. This also affects combat, by the way. You roll a die and your thrust reduces that die roll. If that total is higher than your Radhardness, you lose the item. That can be pretty bad when there's items that have a Radhard of 0. I know that there are some here. I don't know. In which case, you really have a tough time keeping them alive. There's one. There's a random events table, which is intricately linked to this. And that, well, here it is. Every time you pass through one of these triangles, you roll on the random events table, and those are generally bad things. Something bad can happen to you on one die roll, but in the rest, generally something happens to everyone, and one of them is a bad thing in the low Earth orbit, where everybody loses their heaviest card, which will slow down the game like it needs it. And another one is a special event, which can allow you to play with the political table up here. I'm not sure how much that really makes sense in the game, but that's what triggers wars, and it's extra victory points. It's almost like this little tacked-on thing that doesn't really have a lot to do with the space exploration to me. Bones for budget cuts. You lose cards from your hand, again lengthening the game. And then random radiation to people out in space, which might be cool. I don't mind that one at all. I think that's kind of neat. What I really mind is, oh look, that comet just slipped away because somebody else moved. That bugs me. And of course, you could sit around out here and it may only be a one turn delay or something. I really don't know why they have not made a good argument for why those comets are able to be hit the way they are. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna probably try to get this played. I just wanted to give you guys a view of this and some thoughts about how I don't think it's gonna help the game, how in fact it just solidified my opinion of the movement system. And I don't know how much it's gonna help. One of the issues that I had with the game was oh look, I'm sitting around for a long time trying to build up to do something. I get something done, and then I go back, and then I'm about ready, and I can do lots of somethings all at once, and then the game's over. I don't think it's going to fix that much. If there's not a lot of players in the game, you place these busted mines, if there's anything under 5, and that makes the area near Earth on the original map contain less valuable stuff, which I think is vaguely a solution. Personally, I would rather see the game actually, and what I was considering anyway, if I saw the game worth modding, I was considering just extending the amount of victory points you need so that exploration in the Earth zone wouldn't be as valuable. But that might, especially in the advanced game, lead to more combat type actions, etc. So I'm just not sure. I still haven't pushed my way through the rules again, and I'm not sure. I'm still debating whether or not I want to do this or just clean this up, mark it down as a big loss, and set something else up.